The summer of 1987 had arrived, and with school out for the year, I eagerly anticipated our annual stay at a resort cabin we reserve, a place filled with exciting activities. At about 9 years old, I was brimming with excitement for trips like these. The resort boasted a well-equipped arcade, a beautiful golf course, and endless wilderness, all set along a tranquil lake with an inviting beach. Our journey there took about 5 hours, an eternity in the eyes of a young child, and definitely included a nap en route. We would stop in different towns along the way, browsing meat shops, antique stores, and a shop known for its mouth-watering saltwater taffies. After what felt like endless anticipation, we finally arrived at the resort. I immediately took a stroll around, waving to people gathered around fire pits at their cabins or chilling near their RVs. I soon found myself at the beach, which only had a few people since we arrived late in the afternoon. I walked to the dock's end, surrounded by paddle boats, speedboats, and pontoons. Standing on the edge, I felt the sensation of movement while gazing into the lake. In the distance, I saw a floating metal platform that people swam to, climbed on, and jumped off of. In the past, I hadn't gone on that platform because I wasn't big enough, but this year, with another season of swimming lessons done and feeling more confident, I was excited to give it a try. As the floating platform shifted, I caught a glimpse underneath and saw a boy holding onto a chain that anchored it. He was staring directly at me. I smiled and waved, but he remained motionless, just staring. When the raft shifted again, he disappeared from view. What truly unnerved me was that when it eventually moved back, he had vanished. I looked all around, expecting the boy to pop up above the water, but after a few minutes, there was no sign of him. I peered under the dock, but the dense seaweed made it unlikely anyone could be there. I was puzzled and mystified, but the thought eventually wore off as the night went on. The rest of the night was spent wandering between our campsite outside the cabin and the arcade, where I had some money to play games while munching on the saltwater taffy from earlier. The next morning, I was eager to go swimming. My mom came down to the beach with me to work on her tan. After laying down our towels and applying sunscreen, I excitedly ran to the water and jumped in. As I swam closer to the floating platform, I kept glancing back at my mom to see if she noticed me being brave and joining the older kids jumping off. She smiled back and waved. Approaching the ladder, I climbed up onto the platform. Excitedly, I waved back to my mom one last time, and after being swarmed by large flies, I took my first jump off the platform, hitting the water and plunging below. I heard a muffled voice crying for help right next to me underwater, prompting me to quickly resurface. Then, someone came jumping down, crashing into the water right next to me and sending a splash my way. After leaping off the platform a few more times, I approached the ladder again, but this time I decided to swim past it and go underneath it. I grabbed onto the chain just like the boy I thought I saw the other night. It was slimy and covered in some kind of green moss. Most of the surface under the platform was like this. Out of nowhere, I was shocked to feel a hand grip my ankle, tugging and trying to pull me under. I screamed, but I wasn't in sight because the platform had shifted, blocking the view from those on the beach. My screams reverberated, bouncing off the metal platform as I tightly held onto the chain, fighting against the tugging force. Eventually, it became overwhelming, and I went under. I kept kicking as hard as I could, trying to resist. When I opened my eyes, I saw the boy from yesterday, now with a ghoulish-looking appearance. He menacingly moved his hands further up my body, causing me to sink to the bottom, which was filled with plants and seaweed. The sight made me scream the rest of my air out. Desperately failing and with consciousness fading, I felt a sudden release. Immediately, I kicked off the ground and surfaced, gasping for air as I broke through. But when I opened my eyes and swam towards the platform ladder, I was enveloped in dense fog, shrouded in the darkness of night. The moonlight cast a glow on the fog, guiding my way. I reached the ladder and climbed up, still gasping for air. The lake was eerily still, a black void. The calls of loons and the buzz of insects brought the otherwise silent landscape to life. Then I heard a splash and looked over to see a hand grasping the ladder, followed by another. Eventually, the cold, dead eyes of that boy were staring at me. I was choking in fear as he gradually climbed onto the platform, his skin ghostly pale, devoid of any life, and water dripped from every inch of him. I stood completely paralyzed, and while frozen, voices rang out around me, and quickly, those voices became louder as the boy inched closer. Suddenly, a bright light overwhelmed my vision, and I realized I was surrounded by people looking down at me as I coughed up lake water. Reality hit me as I expelled what felt like the heaviest burden I've ever known, each breath bringing me back to life. My mom, tears streaming down her face, looked at me with an immense relief as I called out to her. I was taken quickly to a local clinic and eventually recovered fully, though the taste of lake water lingered for weeks. It was almost impossible to comprehend what had happened, and I expressed my desire to go home. When I explained about the boy who pulled me under, I was shocked but not entirely surprised to hear that there was a boy named Edward who had drowned after drifting too far out several years back. Odd and creepy coincidence being that the lake was also named Lake Edward. Decades have now passed, and I returned to that resort for the first time a few years ago. Fortunately, I didn't see anything, but the haunting feeling came back when I looked out at that same floating raft. It made me wonder if Edward's still out there somewhere, wandering the lake, searching for any connection to life.